Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, sometimes the stories that are hardest to believe are pulled from day to day life, sadly enough. And you know what? If you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide ranging variety of entertainment industry professionals and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and in a conversational fashion. And you know, if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that you do because you're listening, and I appreciate that. So keep listening and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button, gives you a 5-star rating on your podcast provider of choice. We're available pretty much everywhere, places like Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and plus we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel, so you can give us a like and subscribe there as well. We would absolutely appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. We're on the Facebook, the Twitter, the Instagram, Letterboxd, the TikTok, and probably a few other places that I'm forgetting, at In the Seats for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because guess what? If we live to watch it and write about it and talk about it, we love it that much more when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please do us that kindness, come on by and pay us a visit. We had a good one on this episode, boys and girls. We're diving back into the world of video on demand. It's out there now. It's called Boneyard, and it's a grim. It's almost true crime, but it's pulling the story of a it's about abductions that happen along the borders, in these border towns, and what happens to these young girls, and just sort of the horrors and the tragedies therein. It's one of those movies that's it's not necessarily based on anything, but it's kind of based on everything. As the skeletal remains of 11 women and girls are discovered in the New Mexico desert, an extensive investigation is launched. And this is all inspired by true crime stories. It follows Detective Ortega, played by Brian Van Holt, Police Chief Carter, 50 Cent, and Agent Petrovick, the one and only Mel Gibson, in a multi-agency effort to identify and apprehend the killer. And as each of their agendas and methods all clash and everything comes to a head, it's amazing to see. It's an amazing portrait to see this kind of the stresses that law enforcement really come under when having to deal with sort of the worst of the worst, like some of these people have to do. And it's from writer-director Asif Akbar. And we had the unique pleasure of sitting down and talking with him about what sort of inspired him and what made him want to tell this story. And so very much more. But like I said, Boneyard is available on video on demand now, but enjoy our talk with Asif, the writer-director, because between you and me, it's a pretty darn good one. Obviously, first off, just thank you so much for the time today, man. I really appreciate this. And just congrats on the movie. I just finished watching it, man. It's absolutely great.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on.
Now, I guess my first question is, walk me through, I guess, the early days of having this story brought to you, or sort of getting sort of into this world. Because whenever I see inspired by true events, I always have my little radar go off. So I'm always kind of curious about that. Like, how much is this? How much is where did the ball
Right.
start rolling on the story?
Well, it happened about 8 years ago when I was working with Vincent A. McDaniel. He's one of my producing partners and writing partners, and we've made several films together. But back then, when we first started working together, he brought this story to my attention. He already had a first draft that he had written with Hank Bird, and it was based on loosely on the West Mesa murders, which was out in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Vince is from Albuquerque, so he was more familiar with that case. I had heard about it from the news here and there, but I wasn't too familiar. And then once I started digging into it, it was a timely thing, one of those, you know, miraculous projects. Every film is a miracle. This was no different, but it was about the right timing to get it, made. And fast forward to about 2 years ago, we changed the script up quite a bit from what it was originally, and we took a lot of inspiration from, different cases other than just the West Mesa murders. That was a central, piece to the story that we were inspired from that story on. But if you watch the movie, there's inspiration from many different, even famous serial killer cases to others that are, very similar in its form. But our goal was always to use this as an awareness and educational piece for people to be aware of these kinds of cases and how much of a social issue it really is, even globally. I mean, some of the stats you see in the movie are real life, I mean, stats that are horrific when you see it and hear it, and it's unbelievable.
There is such an interesting dynamic, especially with these characters having to exist in this world, because it's not necessarily a question of, I mean, particularly for the cops, like being good guys or bad guys, but it's just a question of there's always going to be a little bit of dirt underneath of everyone's fingernails. Like to sort of to really be able to understand these worlds and catch these people, you can't necessarily sort of. It feels like sort of have that play it by the book mentality. And I mean, I think a lot of that comes through in Mel's character and Brian's
Mhm.
character, but even seeing sort of Nora kind of descend into that world was fascinating. Can you talk to me a little bit about, I guess, finding the right people for the right parts?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, there's many different characters throughout this film, and they're all layered and they're all different, and they all bring something, very vital to the case and the story. And like, for example, like Nora, I mean, she's a minority, when it comes to being a woman in a man's world in an investigation like this, which is very common in the law enforcement, world, where it's run by male detectives, male agents, male, chiefs. And sometimes it's very important to have more females in the front lines with them when it's dealing with female victims or cases like this where you need that woman's perspective to be able to even assess a situation or to handle a situation with a victim. Like, for example, in the movie we kind of show that a little bit, the difference between a woman being interrogated by a male detective versus a female detective. You can already feel the difference and the comfortness difference between them. So for us, that was important to show it kind of in a realistic way and not to like you know make it all about female detectives in investigating female victims or whatnot. That's just how it is.
For sure. No, 100%. Now I'm curious on a shoot, like, did you get a lot of time? Like, was there like was this a long shoot, a quick shoot? Because I mean, obviously, when you're doing an investigation like this as a cop, there's going to be this tension and this energy that's always there until you find the son of a bitch who's doing all this. And I mean, you can really
Right.
feel that through the actors. And I mean, how did you manage to sort of keep the energy up? Was it just through sort of necessity because it was a quick shoot, or was there something else that you did?
It was a mix of everything. I mean, when cameras started rolling, surprisingly, like every actor from even like you see, the small characters to the big, they all, fell into the characters very naturally, and the environment that we had with the set design and just the mood of the set. We all recreated, I would say, that world, that time period, the 2009 Albuquerque, New Mexico. And even though we shot in Nevada, it was a very similar environment. And we did a lot of pre-pro work. We prepared the actors, we cast the actors with also their track record of playing similar characters as well. Like Brian Van Holt, he played cop on Deputy, that TV series Deputy, which was filmed in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He was very well aware of the real life West Mesa murders case and when he was out there even at that time. And so a lot of the people were familiar with it. Even Mel Gibson was familiar with the story, from the real case and hearing about it. And, we all did our homework and kind of prepped for it.
Now, I guess the next question is how to get Mel to say yes, because I mean, I can imagine in pre-production you can laugh and say, "Oh, we should ask Mel Gibson," but then you actually got him. I mean, that's another story in and of itself.
It is. I mean, it's one of those things that I just kind of stuck with my original vision and gut feeling of, okay, this is right for Mel, and I want Mel for this role. And, obviously there were people that told me, oh, it'll never happen, or, he's too picky, too hard to get, whatnot. But it came down to the material and the script, and I guess, Mel was drawn to the material. And one of the things he told me is he was just fascinated by this, you know, not just the West Mesa case, but just in, these kinds of true crime stories in general, that again, the same thing we were all saying is like it's an educational piece. It's something that could bring awareness to a cold case and how it's handled and how the investigation is handled. So there's a lot of elements to it that's very fascinating.
Now I'm curious because I mean, obviously you've been working for a little bit now, and I mean you've had a pretty extensive career. I'm kind of curious how you've seen the business evolve. I mean, particularly over the past maybe 10, 15 years, just given sort of the rise of the streamers and just sort of the demand for, quote unquote content out there, and also just the availability of, I guess, maybe even financing from foreign elements. Because I mean, you can make an action movie in a different language and you can still sell it across the world because an action movie is an action movie. It really feels like the landscape for making films has evolved in a very sort of global way, and I'm kind of curious on your perspective on that.
No, you've hit it right on the head. And I always mention this thing. It's global film industry that we're working in now. It's
Yeah,
completely a global film industry. It's not, oh, the Hollywood film industry or the Chinese film industry, the Indian film industry. We're all kind of working on the same playing field globally with the same kind of technology and talent. And there aren't really any borders anymore when it comes to filmmaking. And I've shot all over the world myself with talent from all over the world, and we speak the same language when it comes to filmmaking. And same thing with the audiences now. They're so connected with the global themes and, the different, international actors that are, coming up to be globally recognized. It's more common. So we need to embrace that more rather than, create separation. And in
totally.
my films, you'll see a lot of diversity, a lot of, you know, um, realism of the society that we're living in today.
For sure, 100%, man. Now, I mean, I gotta ask, it's a silly question, but it's one I always like to ask people. Like, was there a movie or sort of a moment in your life that had the light bulb go off that made you want to get into this industry?
Yes, I mean, one movie that everyone knows about was Terminator 2.
Yeah,
When I grew up watching Terminator 2 and a lot of the James Cameron and Spielberg movies that were so innovative and made making movies look like, being a magician, and it's like movie magic they call it. It really is. And so to create that world, like when I saw Terminator 2, that was a very innovative film that broke many barriers and introduced a lot of new things. And I was so fascinated by, that film that I wanted to make films from there on. And so that's one that definitely sticks with me.
for you at the end of the day, like when you're looking at a project or an idea, like where do you begin? Is it a question of like, you want to do an action movie, or want to do this, you want to do that, or does it all come down to this is a really interesting story? Let's see how we can flesh it out, no matter which way it goes.
For me, it's about what inspires me and motivates me at that time to, put my commitment and time behind. Because taking on a film as a director, it's almost like giving up 2 years of your life.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Sometimes more. You know, um, and especially when it's a hard subject matter to deal with, like Boneyard, where it takes a psychological, emotional toll on you for months and months and, sometimes years. In a way, I mean, Boneyard is a film that's been in the making for 8 years in my life, from the time I first got my hands on the script to now. It's been evolving in my head. I've had the visions and to kind of seeing that come to life, it was is inspiring in itself and motivates you to just know the journey that it took to bring something like this to the audiences that has a life of its own now.
Would it be fair to say that something like Boneyard is probably one of those ones that'll maybe stick with you more than most? Because I mean, even in watching it, I could feel sort of the personal nature of the story, even though like I didn't know the characters and like it felt personal. Just having to sort of live in this world, you couldn't help but take it personally.
Absolutely. And I think that connection is shared with everybody that was involved in this film. It was definitely an emotional film to make. Also because, you think about those victims, not just about the West Mesa murders victims, but all the victims of the missing persons cases, trafficking cases, the murder, serial killing cases. You just feel the heaviness in the air of telling a story like this. But it needs to be told. Someone has to tell these stories to bring more awareness. And sometimes, um, like we've all talked about, movies like these can help sometimes solve cases and close cold cases. So hopefully, our goal is to, serve some purpose in either closing some cold cases or helping somebody, saving a life, bringing them awareness of what to do in a situation, when they could be a victim. So yeah, that's what makes it worth it.
Now, I mean, I'm curious, just to put a bow on this, as sort of the lead voice and the storyteller, how do you manage to, on one end, exist in this very grim world and sort of get these facts out there and make people understand how real and how ugly this is, but at the same time maintain a certain level of entertainment value at the same time? Because I think you did that here. And I mean, I think that's the magic because sometimes movies can swing one way or the other. And this manages to walk the line.
Well, that definitely came from a great effort from the entire team. The collaboration we've had from every single person working on this film that made it comfortable for us to deal with such a, heavy subject matter, but at the same time, I mean, have fun with it while you're making, you have to
Yeah,
kind of like what you're doing in the moment of creating any film. And so we had to find the inspiration in every bit of it, individually. The actors had something to play off of. I mean, it's one of those things that you have to know what you're doing. And at the end of the day, we were making a movie. It's a
yeah,
movie. We're making a movie, but we're also staying true to the subject matter. And I think it kind of came together naturally
for sure.
with us all having that common goal.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, Asif, man, just thanks for having that common goal and just, thank you for the work and thank you so much for the time today. I can't wait for more people to see Boneyard. It's great. I loved it.
Thank you. Thank
All
you.
right. And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.